Okay, folks, just about to go live. And we are, so welcome to the extraordinary council meeting to consider the wastewater standards submission from City Council. I have Pania on Zoom and an apology from Peter Kett. Somebody like to move those? Barry and Grant, thank you. All those in favour?
Aye.
Carried. The floor is yours, Erin. So just before you start, just a quick question from me. Was that report generated by AI?
The report cover letter?
No, the whole lot. I had a meltdown yesterday when I read it and I thought I actually agree with everything. There's got to be a trap
our
here.
AI's been learning?
I don't think a human being's bloody done this report.
Dare I say it was prepared by a lawyer?
Oh, that's even worse.
Very good, very good.
Well, I'll take the.
That qualifies as artificial intelligence.
Not necessarily.
Good point.
Shots fired. Councillor Sobel.
Right, Erin, the floor's yours.
Thank you, Chair. This follows on from the previous legal advice that we had around the discussion document on the new wastewater standards that are currently in development by Tamata Arawai. As advised at that previous meeting, we have been preparing a submission to go back around those standards. The submission is provided as part of the paper. Some of those key issues that are really of concern from a staff perspective and what we've put in draft to council to go back to Tamata Arawai on is particularly things around the lack of clarity around the operating environment or discharge environment. And the fact that particularly we've gone to Stantec and asked them as our advisors which environment would we fall into for the Bluff Wastewater Treatment Plant. They've made an assessment for us, but they have also been very clear to us that it is not clear. And obviously one of the key things for us moving forward, both for our assessments of where we fall, but also for regional council in assessing any future consent applications, we expect it to be very clear what receiving environment we are discharging into. Some of the key things for us is that at the moment we've been assessed as falling into the low energy coastal zone. In particular for us, our belief that anywhere along that coastal zone of the Fovo Strait is absolutely not a low energy environment. It's some of the rougher water in the country. So we would definitely go back and say there needs to be some more clarity and assessment around what is considered to be a low energy zone. And it has quite significant implications for council at the moment if we are considered to be coastal or whether we're considered to be an ocean-based environment moving forward. The other piece around this is those transition provisions that are not well articulated in both the current legislation as well as in the draft standards. So at the moment, once our consent does expire, there are no transition provisions for us to then develop, a new consent moving forward. Essentially, if we received a 2-year rollover under the proposed legislation, we would have to have constructed whatever solution we come up with within that 2-year period. The current Resource Management Act provides an opportunity for us to follow a consenting pathway, get a consent, and then agree a program to do the construction following that without being in breach of your current consent. At the moment, those transition provisions aren't in place. So unless you've actually constructed the physical works, which would be pretty crazy to do before you have a consent for those works, then you will fall out of consent of your treatment plant at the day your previous consent expires. So we have been advised that there is a strong intention for those transition provisions to be put in, but they are not there yet. So we need to be very clear around that. We're very supportive of that fixed 35-year time frame moving forward, and also leading into that sort of assessment of low energy coastal in particular. We do believe that the nitrogen requirements are still too stringent in that environment at the moment. So those are the key points that we've gone back with. I'm happy to take any questions.
Yep. So just one from me, was just an observation on the early part of it under 15G. where you make, which is on page 8 of board books, where you make reference to the lack of clarity around discharge to land, and was that an intentional move? My view of that is it is an intentional view, that it has a consequence of encouraging discharge to water and disencouraging land at this stage. I think that's not an error. I think that's central government saying this is the way we discourage the land costs, which are probably more expensive than the water costs. Questions, councillors? Oh, sorry, Rangi.
Thanks, Chair. Look, a couple of questions regarding, it was good that you had the wee analysis at the start that simplifies the questioning process. B, the compliance with the standards limiting contaminants now should be the sole quality related thing. What else do you anticipate in getting in the road of that? So obviously if you're saying that's the sole thing, what else are you worried about that may sort of cloud the waters?
So one of the concerns is that we believe that the intention that was put forward by the government around these standards were that if you meet those standards, you will then have a very clear pathway through to a consent, and that the regional council won't be able to impose additional standards over and above those. What the concern is that at the moment it leaves open to the regional council to decide that it wants other standards to be met. So for example, other contaminants, microplastics is a good example. There's the ability currently under the legislation for us to put in an application that meets the standards, and regional council to say, yes, you meet the standards for those particular contaminants, but we actually want you to also treat for these things now as well.
Okay, right. So you want it to be WEP and that's it?
Under that pathway,
yeah.
Yes. The other piece is that at the moment the intention of what the executives at Te Mata Arawai are advising is that they intend, and it's not well written and they need to tidy that up, is that you will only be able to get a consent through compliance with the standards. Mm-hmm. Now, I had expected that the compliance with the standards would essentially be a simpler path through to get a consent, and that if you didn't want to take that one-size-fits-all approach, that you would still be able to take a traditional RMA approach where you looked at the actual discharge effect on the receiving environment, and you could use that longer RMA process if you wanted to. At the moment, what they are advising is their intention is that you will simply meet the standards, or you don't meet the standards, and there will be no other pathway. What I've suggested to them is that I think there will always be exceptions to the rule. I do personally think standardisation is a really good thing, and it will simplify things for most plants around the country. But one size fits all always has exceptions for places where it won't work, and in that case I do think there would be benefit to there being an alternative pathway to assess that on its merits.
So that leads into the next question, which is if you don't meet the standards, which that's what I thought it was all about, meeting the standards, you're asking for a back door.
I would like to see an alternative process, because I do believe the standards should be a simplified process, but I do think that there should be if you can make an alternative case that you don't meet the standards, but there is no impact on the receiving environment, why would that be a problem?
Yeah, gotcha. There's no... Right, and the last question is, you talked about the low energy discharge. Now, surely that determination of our coastal waters should be a science-based determination, and they should be able to work out, say, the volumetric exchange capacity of the tidal thing. They should be able to do that in science and come up with so many, whatever QMX or whatever the things are, that they can work out actually happens. And it's not up to an opinion. It should be a science.
I would agree.
And that's, you believe they haven't used science so far, or what?
The definitions aren't sufficiently clear that they are leaving it open to interpretation and ambiguity.
Which is the point in our submission.
Oh, yeah, no. So, no, I'm just making sure of that, because I want to know where the conjecture is, where where it's not simple. Okay, so it's not simple in the WEP standards.
It's not, that's right. Currently, the disclosure document that has outlined the standards and the classifications between the different receiving environments isn't sufficiently clear that we definitely fall into a particular category.
Right, so it doesn't have that
We
necessary...
think we may fall into a particular category.
So it's lacking that necessary scientific detail.
Yes.
No, fair enough. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, Alex,
Oh, sorry, that's practically answered.
you're
what I was
okay?
going to say.
Grant.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Look, firstly, thanks, Erin, for your report. I think it's very clear. Just with respect to a couple of questions, through the process we worked through recently, affordability was a key tenet to, decision. My word. Any consideration, including in the submission, a point around how important that will be for the decision-making process? Have you given any thought to that or got any perspective on that?
Yes, and so there is a point there around affordability and the fact that the standards may be pushing councils into standards that aren't affordable.
Right.
But if you think that we need some more emphasis around that, I'm happy to include some more
where is the
emphasis
point?
on that affordability. I would need to go back and check that.
4.4 on page 11 is probably one of the places you've made that point.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, cost benefit. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, cheers.
Any other questions? You, Tom?
Picking up Councillor Pottinger's point, am I right in thinking that the difference between low energy and high energy at the moment is purely a matter of distance from shore and depth?
That's correct.
Right. So in the case of, is it going to be both? So have you got to be both 500 metres from shore and being 10 metres, or it can be one or the t'other?
No, so as I understand it from the technical experts, there's some inconsistency between currently what would be required in terms of depth and simply the distance-based requirements of the new standards.
So 500 metres is easy to know, but do we know how far out before you hit 10 metres from the bluff?
Approximately a kilometre.
A kilometre. Okay, so there's a material difference between it being one or the t'other. Or
There is.
okay, yeah, thank you.
Any further questions? No? Somebody like to move the
Happy to move.
move? Thank you, Leslie and Barry. Any further questions on before I put that? We've got two, just receive the report and then we approve the attached submission to enable lodgement to the regulator. All those in favour?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Carried. You get off light again? Oh, I don't know. Thank you.